Okay, let's get started. Good morning, and thank you for joining the Maryland Chamber Foundation for today's webinar. We are pleased to be partnered again with the Maryland Department of Labor to bring our membership information on the Work Sharing Unemployment Insurance Program. My name is Whitney Harmel, and I'm the Vice President of Membership and Development for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce and the Maryland Chamber Foundation. My colleagues and I here at the Chamber hope that you and your team and your families are staying safe and healthy. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our speakers. All attendees should be muted upon entry, but if you're not, please go ahead and mute yourselves. And we ask that you do stay muted throughout the entirety of the webinar today. To help limit any bandwidth issues, we're asking that all attendees please turn off their cameras. This can be done at the bottom left of your screen. Speakers, please keep your cameras on for the full hour. So with everyone's camera turned off, we're actually going to suggest that you go to the top right of your screen and select speaker view. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be added to the Maryland Chamber's website under our COVID-19 resources page. We will have a robust Q&A session with our speakers today. Our Vice President of Government Affairs, Ashley Duckman, will be monitoring the chat feature for questions. Please know that your questions will be public unless you send Ashley a private note through the chat feature. Thank you to those who submitted questions ahead of time. If we run out of time today and do not get to your question, or your question is really specific, we will pass it along to Brian and his team. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Brian Moore has served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Maryland Department of Labor's Division of Unemployment Insurance since October 2017. Prior to his appointment, Brian served as the Assistant Secretary of the Louisiana Workforce Commission's Division of Workforce Development, where he led efforts to reform the public workforce system in Louisiana with a focus on the creation of career pathways through collaborative partnerships with business and industry, education, government, and community-based organizations. His 25+ years of experience as a workforce development professional has been invaluable in helping the division fulfill its mission to put people back to work as quickly and efficiently as possible. Brian leads this mission by implementing initiatives designed to build a bridge to reemployment for individuals receiving unemployment insurance benefits in Maryland, as well as effective strategies to help employers avert laying off valued employees when possible. Brian received his bachelor's degree from Dillard University and his law degree from Tulane University. Upon completion of Brian's presentation today, we will be joined by Phil TULKOFF. Phil is the president and CEO of TULKOFF Food Products, Inc., a family-owned and operated manufacturer of condiments, sauces, and dressings. He joined the company 15 years ago to be the third generation of TULKOFFs to lead the organization. He holds a mechanical engineering degree from Bucknell University and an MBA from Loyola University. Prior to joining the family business, he spent 11 years in aerospace engineering and 11 years in computer consulting. Phil is a member of the board of directors for the Baltimore Museum of Industry, the Maryland World Class Consortium, and Valor Service Dogs. He is also a member of the Maryland Manufacturers Advisory Board. Thank you both for being here today. And with that, I would like to bring in Brian Moore for his presentation. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you so much, Whitney. Good morning to everyone. And I'm so thankful to be able to be joining the Maryland Chamber of Commerce this morning to have a conversation about Maryland's work sharing program. We'll get on with the presentation. Next slide, please. So what is the work sharing program? A quick overview of work sharing. Work sharing is a layoff aversion and reopening strategy for employers within the state of Maryland. As an alternative to layoffs, under the normal program, employers that are experiencing economic downturns will be able to, in lieu of laying off their employees, will be able to reduce the number of hours that they're working. And for the number of hours that those employees will be working, those employees would receive a percentage of the unemployment insurance benefits that they would receive had they been laid off 100%. During this pandemic, we're implementing a special initiative that's been made possible through some provisions made available through the CARES Act, which would allow us to offer work sharing as a reopening strategy to those employers who were forced to close down, and give them the ability to help return those employees that were laid off as a result of COVID-19 without having to pay 100% of the full time that they'd be working. So in other words, if a person was normally working 40 hours a week, that employer now has to make decisions when they return to open their businesses of how many employees are they able to afford to bring back. And so as opposed to bringing back some and not bringing back others because of revenue challenges, we can use the work sharing program so they could potentially bring every one of those employees that they laid off back at a reduced number of hours. And those employees will receive, as I mentioned earlier, a percentage of the unemployment insurance benefits had they been laid off 100%. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits to the work sharing program? We always try to emphasize that it's a win-win for both the employers and the employees who have been affected. And so just some brief highlights of the employee benefits. It gives employers an opportunity to maintain the productivity and the quality of service that they're providing to customers. It gets them to retain experienced employees that they've invested a tremendous amount of time and effort and resources to make sure that they understand that employees' way of doing business. It helps keep employee morale high because you don't end up having some employees getting laid off while others are not, and they're nervous as to whether they're going to be next in line to lose their jobs. It helps to utilize the entire business or select units to participate in the work sharing program. Again, it helps to maintain the full staff for future business growth when the economic conditions return, which we all expect that hopefully someday soon we'll be back to normal economic activities in the state of Maryland. There'll be no need to recruit or hire new employees because your employees will have remained attached to your workforce until such time the economy improves and revenue continues to get better. It gives employers the opportunity to gradually reopen their business operations by rehiring the former employees at a reduced number of hours. Now, the benefit to the employees is that they get to keep their jobs. And so they're not being laid off and struggling to figure out if they're going to ever receive their unemployment insurance benefits, challenges of finding employment within the same industries that they're accustomed to working in with the skills that they have, and they don't have to be concerned about learning new skills or going back to school to be able to compete in an ever-changing world and economy. It gives those employees the opportunity to earn wages for the hours worked. It prorates their unemployment insurance benefits to supplement those lost wages. And in most cases, those employees will get the opportunity to maintain the health benefits, any fringe benefits that employee was paying to them prior to them receiving a reduced number of hours and participating in the work sharing program. And I can't really see that last bullet because it's part of the screen is being blocked. So we can just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what are some of the requirements for the work sharing program? One is that the program, in order for an employer to be considered for it, at least 2 employees must be part of that work sharing plan. The next requirement is that it reduces the employee hours equally. So every employee that's within that affected unit needs to have an equal reduction in their hours. And in Maryland, that percentage can range as low as 20%, or you can reduce the hours up to 50% of a normal work week. It's good for no more than 26 weeks in a year per unit. And it's not for seasonal or cyclical shutdown. So in other words, it's available when an employee is experiencing an abnormal economic downturn, and not for employees that work in environments where seasonally or cyclically they can expect shutdowns. Employees current with unemployment insurance tax contributions. So one of the first questions we're going to ask in the application is the tax UI tax identification number, so we can check to make sure that the employer is current on taxes. If the employer is not current on taxes, we'll help them figure out what the balance is, and once they become compliant with the tax requirements, then they can proceed with the application. Employees must have been working for the employer for at least 3 months. Now, this is under normal circumstances. We're making an exception for this to some degree for the reopening strategy, in that as long as that employee was working for that employer prior to the shutdown, then we can waive the 3-month requirement. But we will not allow employers to hire new people and put them immediately onto the work sharing program. So it must be for those employees who were laid off under this strategy. Employees who are full-time, permanent, part-time, exempt salary, or hourly are all eligible to participate in the program. However, those who are part-time, seasonal, and intermittent workers, or temporary workers, they're not eligible to participate in the program by law. Next slide, please. So next steps. What we'd like you to do is to visit our website at www.labor.maryland.gov/worksharing for more information. We notify your employees and the bargaining agents if applicable. So if the employees are part of a bargaining unit, we would ask that you notify the bargaining agent to make sure they're aware of what the plans are. Return your application to ui.worksharing@maryland.gov within 7 to 15 calendar days of the anticipated work sharing start date. A decision will be made by our office within 15 calendar days of receipt of a completed application. So we're going to move the process fairly quickly. If approved, the employee will submit a weekly certification claim of the employee hours that they actually worked for that week. The employees would not need to submit weekly claim certifications to the unemployment insurance office like normal unemployment insurance claimants must do each week in order to continue to receive the benefits. So in essence, once the employer submits a completed application, we'll review it, we'll approve it, and the employer can start that plan. And the only effort that needs to take place at that point will be the employer submitting a weekly certification form to us so we can verify the number of hours that those employees work for that particular week, so we can determine the exact percentage of the unemployment insurance benefits that they will receive. Next slide. Final slide.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, for that overview. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashley Duckman. I am the Vice President of Government Affairs here at the Chamber. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker. Whitney had already given you his bio, but Phil TULKOFF is a member of the Chamber, a good friend, a great partner, and his company has been effectively using this program. And so we thought it would be beneficial to the participants on our webinar to hear directly from an employer who has experience using the program, your perspective. So Phil, I'll turn it over to you to give some of your perspectives on the program, what's worked, how it's benefited your company and your employees, and then we will have some time at the end for question and answer with both of our speakers. So Phil?
Great, thanks Ashley. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so just a little bit more background on us. So we are a 90-year-old family-owned and operated manufacturer of condiments, sauces, and dressings. We're in Baltimore City. We have about 100 employees, of which about 63 are hourly, and the balance are salaried employees. About half of our business is in the food service industry, which means we sell to people like Cisco and US Foods and PFG and Gordon's, all those trucks that you see delivering to restaurants and hotels and caterers. And as you can imagine, that was a big segment of the economy that got hit pretty hard by the shutdowns due to COVID. So about on March 16th, the bottom pretty much dropped out of the food service business. Not only did it stop, but it went backwards for us. We had about 30,000 cases of orders were canceled starting on March 16th, going for about the next 2 weeks. And from about March 16th through the end of May, we saw that segment of our business drop about 87%. So as you can imagine, we had a lot of idle time on our hands. So at a sheer luck, a friend of mine who's also in the manufacturing industry sent me info about the WorkShare program. I looked into it quickly. My HR manager dug into it deeper, and we determined that it was a perfect fit for what we were seeing. And we decided to do it because it allowed us to keep our entire workforce and not let anybody go. We essentially moved from 5 days a week, 40 hours, to 32 hours a week for all the hourly employees. Even that was probably a little heavy, but we wanted to keep everybody employed. It was super easy for everyone, for the HR manager, for the employees, because the employer submits all the paperwork. You don't have to have, in my case, it was 63 people. I don't need 63 people to individually go to the unemployment office and file paperwork and figure out how it works and worry about it. The HR manager takes care of all that. She makes the submission. So as I mentioned, we had a drop off on March 16th, and by March 23rd, we were enrolling in the program. So for us, we did it very quickly. It allowed all the employees to keep their jobs. They maintained pay for the 4 full days a week, and they received unemployment for that 1 day per week that we were essentially not using them. And because of what was going on with the special COVID extra money, they also got the full $600 per week extra benefit. So, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but they're literally making more money with this situation than had they been working the 5 days a week for us. The other thing that you got to take into account that helps a lot is that there's a lot of flexibility in the program. So when you submit your employees, we submitted them by group, by basically area in which they worked. So shipping, receiving, maintenance, sanitation, first shift production, second shift production. So the key is that each one of those groups has to individually have a set number of hours that you've reduced them by. So initially everybody was reduced by that 1 day, but you can bring groups back or reduce them more individually by group based on what's happening in the business. So that allows us flexibility as well as bringing a couple of groups back sooner than some of the other groups. So there's a lot of flexibility there as well. So we used 8 groups over an 11-week period for, it was actually 64 employees. Overall, it was pretty seamless. I think the only problems we had was the same problem everybody was having with unemployment, was the poor office was overwhelmed. So early on, it was really hard to just get some answers and information because they were just so swamped with everybody in the entire state applying for unemployment. And this program, I think, was relatively popular. So overall, a great program. We are now out of it. Luckily, the business has come back to a point where everybody is back full time. But if things slip again or there's a shutdown across the country and we see it, we will jump right back into it. So overall, for us, a great program.
Great. Thank you, Phil. And thank you, Brian, for both of your perspectives, for an overview of the program and employer's perspective on how you utilized it and the benefits. We very much appreciate that. I think we'll turn now to some Q&A. We did have a number of questions that were submitted in advance, so I will cruise through those, but also for those of you who are participating and have questions for either of our presenters, you can submit them in the Zoom group chat feature, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So Brian, the first question that I have that wasn't listed on your pre-list of questions is, how many employers are currently using the program in Maryland right now? And have you seen an uptick in the number of employers that have applied since there had become some uncertainty about if and when the federal unemployment benefits would expire?
So thank you for the question. Yes. Let me say this, prior to COVID-19, Maryland only had 2 active work sharing plans that were operational. Maryland was at full employment for a number of years prior to the pandemic that we're in right now. Currently, we have about 278 employers that are participating in the work sharing program with over 380 unique plans. As Phil mentioned earlier, you have some employers that will have multiple plans. And so based on the units and the size of that employer, they may end up with 5, 10, 15 separate plans. And so we may always have more plans than we have employees actually participating in it. And what was the second part?
I just was wondering if you had seen, if the department had seen in sort of an uptick in the number of employers that had applied to utilize the program in the last month or two, given sort of the uncertainty about federal unemployment benefits and whether or not those would expire. I didn't know if there was any correlation to more employers trying to utilize this program recognizing that coming to an end maybe.
Ashley,
Based on
good question. I don't see it being an uptick based on those factors. I think there's an uptick based on employers beginning to learn that the program actually exists. I don't think many employers in the state were aware of the work sharing program. While a previous interview I mentioned it was one of the better kept secrets in the state. And for good reason, as I mentioned, years prior to the pandemic, there was no need. There were many employees had they even applied, they would have been denied because they would not have qualified because they were not experiencing necessarily economic downturn. Right now, but we're considering, based on the pandemic, there's an economic downturn in activities in every industry of business throughout the state of Maryland.
Great, thank you. That's a kind of a good segue to one of the questions that came in advance. The first part of the question is, which you sort of touched on a little bit, but maybe we can expand upon it. This individual is curious about the cost to the employer in participating in the program. And then the second part of their question is this option only available during a pandemic or a state of emergency? Okay,
excellent two-part question. I'll take the last part first. So work sharing is around all day, every year, even prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and subsequent to the pandemic. We have different flexibilities during the pandemic. So it gets to the first part of that question about whether employers will be charged. During this period of the pandemic, of the CARES Act in particular, which is through December 31st of 2020, states are given the option under the unemployment insurance program guidance from the United States Department of Labor. States have a choice whether to charge employers for usage of those benefits that are paid to employees or not charge them. Maryland has chosen to not charge its employers because states are going to be reimbursed 100% for the benefits that we're paying to those employees that are participating in their employers' work share plans. And so we think it's reasonable and fair to not charge our employers during that period of time. However, subsequent to December 31st, 2020, assuming that the CARES Act will not be extended, then all states must begin charging those employers once again for the benefits that are being paid out to the employees.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in advance, which I think both Brian and Phil can maybe give some context on. This individual says, I have employees in multiple states, and I understand this program is for Maryland employees who reside in Maryland. Since I have employees outside of Maryland, does this prevent me from participating in the Maryland Unemployment Work-Share Program for my Maryland employees?
So let me correct the assumption, because the question makes an inaccurate assumption.
Okay.
Work sharing is for the employers of that respective state. So we're just talking about Maryland here, right? So the Maryland Work Sharing Program is for Maryland employers and the employees who are part of that employer's work share plan that's working in that affected units. Unemployment insurance benefits in general, and even with respect to work sharing program, it matters not where a person lives. The question is where that individual earned its wages. And so if it's a Maryland employer doing business in Maryland, then it doesn't matter where the employees reside. They're working in Maryland, they're earning wages in Maryland, they're eligible to participate in that employee's work share program.
Yeah, Ashley, if I could add to that, we also have a facility in Northern California that has about 35 people. And we applied to California's work share program for that particular facility. Every state does it a little differently. So I will tell you, I'm not up on the details, but the California plan was slightly different than how Maryland worked. And I will tell you, it was much more difficult to get approved and get everything through. It took a lot longer than Maryland's plan, but I believe I know for a fact that some other states do have this type of plan, but they vary from state to state.
Thank you both. A number of questions have come in as it relates to how employers are determined to be seasonal and what sort of seasonal employers, what options are available to them through this program. We had a question come in that an employer had applied but was previously denied due to being deemed seasonal. And so the question is there a process through which we could dive deeper into a better understanding of what is seasonal, and again, what options are available to seasonal employers through this program, if any.
I will, what I would like to do, Ashley, is I will provide, subsequent to this webinar, I will provide specific definitions that's found in state statute and federal rules of what, how a seasonal employee is defined, how an intermittent employee is defined, how a temporary employee is defined as it relates to this program.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we will provide that information to the specific individuals that ask those questions. And if we can, of course, at the Chamber do anything to assist in facilitating a deeper dialogue, we're happy to do that as well. Another question that has come in, Brian, can you please provide some additional explanation on whether or not an employer can apply for a new plan after the original plan has run its full 26 weeks?
And the short answer to that question is absolutely.
Okay. Terrific. Another one that has just come in through our chat feature, is the work sharing program applicable to all industries? Specifically, this question or this industry or employer is one that the work is based on projects that have specific start and end times. So the question is the work sharing program available to sort of all industry areas regardless of how the work is structured?
Yes, so currently under this current reopening strategy during the pandemic, again, is going to be available to all industries, all businesses within every industry. During normal circumstances, it's going to be predicated on an economic downturn of activity within that particular industry.
Perfect, thank you very much. Here's a question about employees that were furloughed during the crisis, during the pandemic. Can employers use work share to bring furloughed employees back on part-time?
I'm thinking. Can you repeat the question? I want to make sure I'm processing it correctly. I'm sorry.
Sure. So this employer suggests that they had 2 full-time employees that they furloughed during the pandemic, and they're wondering if this program can be utilized to bring them back part-time.
It can, as long as, again, long we fall into that 20% to 50% ratio in terms of reduction of hours, they will be eligible. In fact, we would love for that employer to utilize this program for that very purpose of bringing those employees back to work.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of exactly what could be used for this program would be used for. So that question sort of in a nutshell is a great example of the exact reason you should be utilizing and leveraging this program. A question that came in through our chat feature, are employers required to disclose the work sharing program to their employees in some way?
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, and we asked that question is asked at least 2 times on the application in terms of have you notified your employees of the program, of your intent to submit an application for the program, and if not, why not? But there also is a subsequent question that's going to, again, ask for a signature of either a representative of that bargaining unit if the employees that are affected are part of a bargaining unit, or if not, then from one of the employees that are part of it so that they're made aware. And we allow, if the answer is no, that they have not notified those employees prior to submitting the application to us, we ask for a simple explanation as to why. And if there's good cause reason as to why they did not provide that answer, we will proceed with the application.
Hey,
Great.
Ashley, could
Yes.
I add to that?
Please.
Yeah, so we actually had meetings. Obviously, it's harder to do meetings now with everyone. We broke it up into smaller groups and stood outside, but we explained this to everyone and how the program worked and why we were doing it and that nobody was going to lose their job. And we turned it into a plus instead of a minus. I mean, people were thrilled that no one was getting laid off, that they were going to pretty much be whole, if not more than whole, when it came to getting all their benefits. One of the questions I asked each group as they came out was how many people know someone that lost their job, and almost everyone in every group knew somebody that had lost their job. So for us, it was really, almost an employee benefit, I'll call it. It was a plus instead of looking at it as a negative, like we're reducing your hours. So you might want to turn that spin on it if you do want to put this plan into place.
If I can add for what it's worth, Ashley,
Sure.
we've yet to experience an application we received where that employer had to rescind his application because of any unrest on the part of employees that did not want to be a part of such a plan.
Great. It's all great information. We had a number, I will say for the rest of our participants, we had a number of questions come in that were very specific to an employer's very specific situation or response that they had gotten. And it is our intention to address each of those individually with those questions, the folks that asked those questions, and connect them with Brian offline. I don't have any more sort of high level questions that have come through the chat feature. So I wanted to see, Brian and Phil, if you had any closing thoughts that you wanted to provide to the audience.
Well, I guess my closing thoughts would be, first of all, to thank, first I want to thank Phil and his company for participating in work sharing. I'm so happy that they had a positive experience with it, and it allowed him to do just what the program was intended to do, was to help him get through tough times. And now he's back in business, and I hope his business soars, just like I do for all other employers in the state of Maryland. I want to thank you all for hosting this, the attendees for participating in the tough questions that come to me. We want to get this word out, so please help spread the word about work sharing in the state of Maryland. We're going to continue to do these type of public service events so we can get that information out to our employers throughout the state of Maryland. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say it's a great tool, worked beautifully for us. I hope I don't have to dip back into it, but if I do, I know that it's there. And anybody in any industry that's experienced a downturn, this is a much better way to do it than to let people go. And also keep in mind that you can break people into groups if it works for the type of business you are, because you might have one area that stays busy because you have a segmented business, and in another area that has a downturn. And using that groups allows you to have flexibility in turning hours on or off as needed pretty seamlessly.
Perfect. Well, I will just take this opportunity to again thank Brian and your team and Phil, as well as our colleagues at the Governor's Workforce Development Board, Mike and Molly, who helped to facilitate this event. The slides from Brian, as well as the recording of the webinar with Q&A, will be available on the Chamber's website later this afternoon under our COVID-19 resources tab. In the chat feature, Whitney Harmel has also included the contact information, an email address for the DOL work sharing team, should you have any more specific questions. And like I said, for those of you who did submit those very specific employer questions, we will be connecting with you offline so that we can get you an answer to your specific concerns. Again, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Phil. Thank you to all of our participants. And as always, if there's anything that the Chamber team can do to support you, please let us know. Reach out to Whitney or myself. Our contact information will also be on that landing page.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.